Hi, my name's Donna Bilak. I'm a Making and Knowing Postdoctoral Scholar. I have a background in history of alchemy, 16th, 17th century, early modern science. Before I became a historian, I was a jewelry designer and wax model maker in Toronto's jewelry industry. So the story that I want to tell you here has to do with learning the utility and value of failure. So I'm going to talk to you about bread molding and sulfur pouring. This was one of the first recipes that we undertook to reconstruct back in September 2014. And the first hurdle that we encountered was having the students go and bake the bread, Exhibit A. As it turns out, none of them actually had any bread baking experience. So that was the first hurdle to overcome. Came to class with their bread that had impressions of an object, a simple object, pressed into the pith in order to leave an impression that you should, according to the author practitioner, be able to pour liquid sulfur into in order to cast objects. So with my background in jewelry, I was like, okay, bread molding, this is weird, and I wasn't really confident that it would do anything. I actually called a couple of my colleagues on both sides of the border, and they agreed with my assessment and said, keep us posted. So I was like, all right, we're flying solo on this one. So one of the students who I was working with had used a little highly polished wooden Buddha, and she brought in her bread. It was actually quite sad looking. It looked like two little hamburger buns that she had taken and pressed the Buddha within. We cut a channel in the top. We sort of jerry-rigged it with masking tape in order to keep the two halves closed. And then we poured the sulfur. When it cooled, we were ready to crack it open and see what lay within. It came out perfectly. It was like polymer. It was a perfect cast. The detail that it picked up was quite remarkable. And I realized in this moment that I had had no faith in our author practitioner. It turns out he actually did know what he was talking about. Bread is a ubiquitous object, so he had actually been using a ready quotidian material that you can experiment with making different kinds of shapes and forms from. And sulfur has a really wonderful property in that when you heat it, it doesn't form a dross like metal does, and you can actually reheat it multiple times. So in terms of the material and in terms of the form, it was a brilliant recipe in its simplicity. It's had me rethink things that I didn't even realize were valuable, in particular failure. Failure is not the end of a conversation, and it's not a closed door. To paraphrase Pamela, it's an invitation to experiment further.